You abandoned us. We slept in the car last night. You told me she meant nothing. Then explain your son's last name. Does he mean nothing too?
Pack a bag, because you're leaving this house today.
12 years of marriage had earned him my implicit trust. So when he swore those late-night texts were just from a needy client, I bought it. I even believed him when he looked me in the eye and promised she meant nothing. That illusion held perfectly until her 7-year-old son walked into my living room, bearing his last name. For a long time, my life felt like it was wrapped in a warm, impenetrable bubble. My name is Lily, and I was married to a man who, to the outside world, was the gold standard of husbands. Davion Mitchell was a senior partner at a prominent architectural firm in Chicago. He was charismatic, fiercely intelligent, and possessed this disarming, easygoing smile that made everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person he had ever spoken to. We had built a beautiful life together. We lived in a stunning, restored Victorian home in Oak Park, a neighborhood known for its manicured lawns and tight-knit community. We had a brilliant 10-year-old daughter named Lily, who had Davion's dark, curly hair and my stubborn streak. I ran a moderately successful landscape design business, which allowed me the flexibility to be a very present mother while still fulfilling my own creative passions. From the outside, we were the Mitchells, untouchable, perfect. But looking back, the cracks didn't appear all at once. They never do. A marriage rarely crumbles in a single day. It erodes, slowly, like a shoreline surrendering to the tide. It started with small, almost imperceptible shifts in Davion's routine. About 18 months ago, his firm landed a massive commercial contract, a sprawling tech campus downtown. Naturally, his hours extended. The 6 p.m. dinners became 8 p.m. reheated plates, which eventually turned into, "Don't wait up, honey, I'm grabbing takeout at my desk." I was supportive. I knew how much this promotion meant to him. But then came the phone. Davion had always been the kind of guy to leave his phone face up on the kitchen island, completely unattended for hours. Suddenly, it became his shadow. He took it into the bathroom. He kept it in his pocket while mowing the lawn. If I walked into his home office unannounced, I'd see him quickly minimize a messaging window, his shoulders tense, before he'd force a relaxed smile. "Just a relentless contractor," he would say, rubbing his temples. Then, there was the name, Rebecca. I first saw her name pop up on his car's Bluetooth display while we were driving to Lily's piano recital. It was a Saturday. The caller ID flashed Rebecca Hayes. Davion immediately hit decline, his jaw tightening. "Who's Rebecca?" I asked casually, adjusting the radio. "Oh, she's the new junior project manager they assigned to the tech campus," he replied smoothly. Too smoothly. "She's incredibly green, panics over every little permit delay. It's exhausting, honestly." I let it go, but the name kept appearing. An email notification here, a hushed phone call in the garage there. One evening, I was organizing our shared home office and saw a receipt sticking out of his leather briefcase. It was for a high-end jewelry boutique, a white gold pendant necklace. My heart did a strange, uncomfortable flutter. My birthday was months away, and our anniversary had just passed. I convinced myself he was buying it as a surprise, maybe a just because gift, or perhaps something for his mother. But weeks went by, and the necklace never appeared. The breaking point of my silent anxiety happened on a Tuesday night. Davion was in the shower, and his phone, which he had forgotten on the nightstand, for once lit up. I didn't want to be that wife. I had always prided myself on our mutual trust. But the pit in my stomach had grown too heavy to carry. I leaned over and glanced at the screen. "Rebecca Hayes. He misses you. We both do. Please tell me you're coming over Thursday." The room started to spin. My lungs felt too small for my chest. He? Who was he? When Davion stepped out of the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist, humming a tune, I was sitting on the edge of the bed holding his phone. The color instantly drained from his face. "What is this, Davion?" My voice was trembling, entirely devoid of the strength I wanted to project. He froze. Then, the machinery of his deception kicked into gear. He sat down next to me, taking the phone gently from my hands, his expression melting into one of deep, condescending pity. "Lily, look at me," he said softly. "Rebecca is going through a horrific divorce. Her ex-husband is abusive. She's been leaning on me as a mentor, and I've been trying to help her navigate the legalities because I know some lawyers. The he is her dog, Buster. I helped her take him to the vet last week when she didn't have a car." He looked so earnest, His eyes were wide, pleading with me to understand. A dog? I whispered, feeling the absurdity of the situation. And what about the necklace, Davion? The receipt I found in your briefcase? He didn't miss a beat. I bought that for the firm's retiring secretary, Martha. It was a group gift from the partners. I just put it on my personal card for the points, and the firm reimbursed me. He pulled me into a hug. I was rigid at first, but his warmth, his familiar scent of cedar and expensive soap, slowly broke down my defenses. Listen to me, he whispered into my hair. She means nothing, Lily. She's a colleague in crisis. You are my wife. You are the mother of my child. My whole world is in this house. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly that I actively chose to ignore the screaming alarm bells in my intuition. I nodded, buried my face in his chest, and let the illusion of my perfect life resume its course. But I had only patched a leak in a dam that was already breaking. For the next few months, Davion overcompensated brilliantly. He was attentive. He brought home extravagant bouquets of hydrangeas, my favorite. He booked a surprise weekend getaway for the two of us to Napa Valley, where we drank expensive Cabernet and made love like we were in our 20s again. He was putting on the performance of a lifetime, and I was the captive audience. But paranoia is a parasite. Once it takes root in your mind, it feeds on every shadow. I found myself becoming a woman I didn't recognize. I started checking our bank statements with a fine-tooth comb. I scrutinized the mileage on his SUV. I analyzed the tone of his voice when he said he was working late. The gaslighting was intense. Whenever I brought up a slight inconsistency, like why his dry cleaning receipt was from a town 30 miles away, he would masterfully flip the script. "Why are you doing this, Lily?" he would say, his voice laced with exhaustion and disappointment. "Why are you looking for problems where there are none? It's insulting. I work 70 hours a week to provide this life for us, and instead of a thank you, I get interrogated like a criminal. You're becoming obsessed, and it's really damaging our marriage." He made me feel crazy. I booked an appointment with a therapist, convinced that I was suffering from generalized anxiety or midlife paranoia. I sat on a velvet couch and cried to a professional, telling her that I was ruining my perfect marriage because I couldn't trust my flawless husband. Meanwhile, the universe was quietly arranging the pieces for my destruction. It was a Sunday in late September. The air was crisp, the leaves in Oak Park turning brilliant shades of amber and gold. We were hosting a family barbecue. My parents had flown in from Ohio, and Davion's parents, Arthur and Helen, had driven over from their condo in the city. The backyard was filled with laughter, the smell of grilled cedar plank salmon, and the sound of our daughter, Lily, playing fetch with our golden retriever. Davion was at the grill, holding a pair of tongs, laughing loudly at a joke his father had just told. He wore a crisp white linen shirt, looking every bit the relaxed, affluent family man. I was in the kitchen, arranging a charcuterie board, feeling a rare moment of genuine peace. "See?" I told myself. "Everything is fine. You were being crazy." Then the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel. "I'll get it," I called out, assuming it was our neighbors, the Harrisons, who had promised to bring over a bottle of wine. I walked through the long hallway of our home, the sunlight streaming through the stained glass transom window above the heavy oak door. I pulled it open with a welcoming smile. The smile died on my face instantly. Standing on my porch was a woman I had never met in person, but whose face I recognized immediately from a frantic, late-night deep dive on LinkedIn months prior. Rebecca Hayes. She looked nothing like the polished corporate junior project manager Davion had described. She looked entirely undone. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy, uneven knot at the nape of her neck. She was wearing a faded gray cardigan over a simple t-shirt, and her eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot, and frantic with an exhaustion I recognized it was the exhaustion of a mother pushed past her breaking point. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice suddenly entirely hollow. My hand gripped the edge of the heavy oak door, so hard my knuckles turned white. Rebecca stared at me. For a second, a flash of something like guilt crossed her face, but it was quickly swallowed by a desperate, hardening resolve. "I need to see Davion," she said. Her voice was raspy, shaking slightly. "Davion is hosting his family right now," I replied, my protective instincts flaring up, trying to shield the fragile peace of my home. "If this is a work emergency, I suggest you call his office line tomorrow." It's not a work emergency, Lily, she said. Hearing my name in her mouth felt like a physical blow. And he won't answer my calls. He blocked my number. He cut off the cards. The landlord changed the locks on my apartment yesterday. The cards, the landlord, the words hung in the air, foreign and jagged. I don't know what you're talking about, I stammered, stepping back, attempting to close the door. You need to leave, or I'm calling the police. Before I could shut it, a heavy hand slammed against the wood from behind me. Davion. He pushed past me, stepping onto the porch. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a chalk outline. His eyes, usually so warm and inviting, were dark and terrifyingly cold. "What the hell are you doing here, Rebecca?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper, completely ignoring my presence. "You abandoned us!" she cried out, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "You didn't pay the rent, Davion. You said you were transferring the money, but you didn't. We had to sleep in my car last night. My car." "Shut your mouth," Davion commanded, taking a menacing step toward her. "I told you this was over. I told you I would send a wire on Monday. You have no right to come to my house. You are insane. You are stalking me." I stood frozen in the doorway, the world blurring around the edges. The man I had slept next to for 12 years had vanished, replaced by this cruel, panicked stranger. "What is going on?" I finally managed to choke out. Davion whipped his head toward me, his face morphing back into a mask of desperate damage control. "Lily, go back inside. This woman is unstable. I had to fire her last week because she developed this psychotic obsession with me. She's delusional." He reached for my arm, trying to physically usher me back inside my own house, but I planted my feet. I wasn't the blind, trusting wife anymore. The veil had been torn. "Don't touch me," I snapped, yanking my arm away. I looked back at Rebecca. She was trembling, wrapping her arms around herself in the crisp autumn air. "A psychotic obsession?" Rebecca laughed, a bitter, broken sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Is that what he told you? That I'm crazy? That I'm just some fling? Some crazy coworker?" She took a deep breath, wiping her nose with the back of her sleeve, her eyes locking onto mine with a devastating mixture of pity and defiance. "He didn't fire me, Lily, because I haven't worked at his firm in 6 years. I quit when I got pregnant." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen straight out of the atmosphere. Even the distant sound of the suburban traffic seemed to mute itself. Pregnant. Before my brain could even begin to process the word, before Davion could lunge forward to shut her up, the storm broke. "Mommy?" A small, timid voice called out from the bottom of our porch stairs. I hadn't seen him standing behind the large stone pillar that anchored our porch. He stepped up into the light, clutching a small, battered Batman backpack to his chest. He was a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. He had a mop of unruly, dark, curly hair. He looked exactly like Lily did when she was that age. He looked exactly like Davion. My knees physically buckled. I had to brace my hand against the brick siding of the house just to stay upright. The air in my lungs turned to glass, shattering with every breath I tried to take. Davion stood completely paralyzed. The confident, articulate man who could negotiate multi-million-dollar architectural contracts with a smile was utterly speechless. He stared at the boy, his jaw slack, the panic in his eyes radiating so intensely I could practically feel the heat of it. "Mommy, I'm cold," the little boy said, stepping up onto the porch and grabbing the hem of Rebecca's gray cardigan. Rebecca put a protective hand on the boy's head, stroking his dark curls. She didn't look at Davion anymore. She looked exclusively at me, delivering the final, fatal blows to my reality. "Lily, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to do this to you. I knew he was married. He told me he was leaving you for 5 years. He told me you two stayed in separate bedrooms, that it was just for your daughter's sake. He set me up in a townhouse in Naperville. He's paid my rent and all of Leo's expenses since the day he was born." Leo. The boy had a name. My mind was a chaotic static of mathematics. 5 years. 7 years old. That meant Davion had met her right around the time Lily was 3. He had been living a double life for 7 entire years. The late nights, the work trips to local sites, the unexplained expenses. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a secondary existence. "Get him out of here," Davion suddenly roared, breaking out of his paralysis. He lunged toward Rebecca, his face twisted in a desperate, ugly rage. "Get that kid off my property right now." The little boy, Leo, flinched violently, hiding behind his mother's legs. "Don't you yell at him," Rebecca screamed back, stepping between Davion and the child like a shield. "You don't get to act like he doesn't exist just because it's inconvenient for you now. You cut us off. You left us with nothing because I finally gave you an ultimatum. Davion, what the hell is going on out here?" The booming voice came from the hallway behind me. Arthur, Davion's father, stood there, holding a half-empty beer, his face a picture of confusion that rapidly morphed into shock as he took in the scene. His son, screaming at a strange, crying woman and a little boy hiding behind her. My parents and Davion's mother, Helen, had materialized behind Arthur, drawn by the shouting. The entire family was now the audience to Davion's absolute destruction. Davion spun around, his hands raised in a placating gesture, completely out of his depth. "Dad, it's nothing. She's a scammer. She's crazy. I'm calling the police right now." He actually reached into his pocket for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he dropped it onto the porch floor. The screen cracked. I ignored Davion completely. I couldn't look at him without feeling violently ill. Instead, I slowly walked past him, stepping closer to Rebecca and the little boy. Up close, the resemblance was undeniably staggering. He had Davion's exact nose, the exact shape of his eyes, but what caught my attention wasn't his face. It was the backpack he was holding like a shield. It was a standard issue, navy blue school backpack, the kind required by the prestigious private elementary schools in the neighboring district. Embroidered in bright, stark white thread across the front pocket, catching the afternoon sun, was the boy's name. It didn't say Leo Hayes. It read, in perfectly stitched cursive, Leo Mitchell. My husband's last name. My last name. "He carries his name," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and lightly touched the embroidered letters. Davion insisted. Rebecca said quietly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "He signed the birth certificate. He said Leo was his son, and he would carry his name. I have the documents in my car." I pulled my hand back as if the fabric had burned me. I turned to look at Davion. He was cornered, trapped between his furious father, his horrified mother, and the undeniable, living, breathing proof of his deception. "She means nothing." I repeated the words he had spoken to me months ago. My voice was eerily calm, the eye of a hurricane. "That's what you told me, Davion. She means nothing." I gestured to the little boy, Leo Mitchell, who was staring up at me with large, terrified eyes. "Does he mean nothing, too?" Davion opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His mother, Helen, let out a sharp gasp and covered her mouth with her hand, leaning heavily against the doorframe. My own father looked like he was about to physically assault Davion, but I didn't want violence. I didn't want screaming. In that exact moment, looking at a 7-year-old boy who shared a father with my daughter, something inside me completely hardened. The Lily who cried on the therapist's couch, the Lily who baked cupcakes and arranged hydrangeas to maintain the illusion of a perfect life, died right there on the front porch. I looked at Rebecca. "Did you say he changed the locks on your apartment?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yesterday. We have nowhere to go." I turned to Davion. The man I had loved for over a decade looked pathetic, small, and terrified. "Davion," I said, my voice ringing with a cold authority I didn't know I possessed. "Pack a bag." He blinked, confused. "What?" "Lily, please. Let's just go inside and talk about this. I can explain." "Pack a bag," I interrupted, my volume rising just enough to echo across the quiet suburban street. "Because you are leaving. You are going to take your son and the woman you've been lying to me about for 7 years, and you are going to figure out where they are sleeping tonight, but it will not be here." "This is my house too," Davion suddenly snapped, his panic turning to desperate anger. "You can't kick me out." "Watch me," I said. The silence that blanketed our porch after my demand was heavier than a physical weight. Davion looked wildly between his parents, my parents, and me, searching for an ally. He found none. It was his father, Arthur, who finally broke the stalemate. Arthur was a retired circuit court judge, a man of rigid principles who had always adored me like a second daughter. He stepped forward, his face flushed with a terrifying, quiet fury. "You heard your wife, Davion," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. "Get your keys, get your things, and get off this property before I call the police myself to have you escorted away for trespassing." "Dad, you can't be serious," Davion pleaded, his voice cracking. "Do not call me Dad right now," Arthur snapped, pointing a trembling finger at his son. "Look at what you have done. Look at this child." He gestured to little Leo, who was now weeping silently into his mother's leg. "You sicken me. Go." Davion, finally realizing the absolute totality of his defeat, didn't pack a bag. He didn't go inside. He turned on his heel, his shoulders slumped, and practically ran down the driveway to his SUV. He didn't even offer a ride to Rebecca and Leo. He simply started the engine and tore out of the cul-de-sac, leaving the woman he'd hidden for 7 years stranded on the lawn of the wife he had just destroyed. My mother immediately rushed forward, wrapping her arms around me as my adrenaline crashed and my knees gave out. Through my blurry vision, I saw my father walk down the steps to Rebecca. He didn't yell. He simply handed her a crisp $100 bill from his wallet. "Call a cab. Get a hotel for the boy tonight," my father said grimly. "Do not ever come back to this house." Rebecca nodded, taking the money with a shaking hand. She picked up Leo, his little Batman backpack digging into her shoulder, and walked down the street toward the main avenue. That night, the beautiful Victorian house we had restored felt like a mausoleum. My parents took Lily to a movie and for ice cream, shielding her from the blast radius of her father's implosion. I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the marble island where, just yesterday, Davion had poured me a glass of Pinot Noir and kissed my forehead. The betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was an amputation. I had to learn how to walk in a world where my entire history was a fabrication. By Monday morning, my grief had metabolized into a cold, clinical rage. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted to dismantle him. I drove into downtown Chicago and rode the elevator to the 42nd floor of a sleek glass building. I walked into the offices of Victoria Harding, one of the most ruthless and respected divorce attorneys in the state. She was a striking, no-nonsense woman with sharp silver hair and a gaze that could cut glass. I sat in her leather chair, laid out the timeline, and handed her the pieces of my shattered life. "He's a senior partner at a major architectural firm," Victoria said, tapping a gold pen against her mahogany desk. "He makes high 6 figures. But maintaining a completely separate household, renting a townhouse in Naperville, paying for private school for the boy, carrying the expenses of a woman who hasn't worked in 6 years, that requires an astronomical amount of liquid cash. Cash that you, as his wife, didn't notice was missing. We had separate accounts for our personal spending, but a joint account for the house and Lily's expenses," I explained, my stomach churning. "He always deposited his share. We never struggled." Victoria leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Men who live double lives are entirely dependent on moving money in the shadows. He's hiding assets, Lily. I guarantee it. I'm bringing in my best forensic accountant. We are going to audit his entire existence." For 3 weeks, Davion lived in an extended stay hotel. He bombarded me with emails, voicemails, and texts, ranging from pathetic apologies to furious gaslighting accusations that I had embarrassed him in front of his parents. I ignored all of them. I changed the locks. I told Lily that her father and I were taking a break because he had made some terrible choices, holding her as she cried into my shoulder. That was the hardest part, watching the collateral damage break my innocent daughter's heart. Then, the forensic accountant's report came back, and the true depth of Davion's depravity was laid bare on Victoria's desk. "He didn't just hide money, Lily," Victoria said, sliding a thick manila folder toward me. "He stole it. From you. From his firm." I opened the folder, staring at bank statements that made no sense to me. "Explain it." 3 years ago, Davion secretly took out a massive second mortgage on your Oak Park home. Because your name is on the deed, he required your signature. He forged it. The room spun. My beautiful home, the sanctuary I had designed and cultivated, was buried in debt to fund his second family. "There's more," Victoria continued, her voice perfectly steady. "Remember that necklace you mentioned? The one he said he bought for the retiring secretary and charged to the firm? That wasn't a one-off. Davion has been funneling thousands of dollars of his second family's expenses, dinners, vacations with Rebecca, even Leo's private school tuition through his firm's corporate accounts, disguising them as client entertainment and consulting fees. He set up a fake LLC to launder the firm's money to pay Rebecca's rent. I stared at the paperwork. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a fraud, a criminal. He cut Rebecca off last week because the firm's internal auditors scheduled a routine quarterly review, Victoria said, connecting the final dots. He was panicking. He tried to freeze his secret accounts to hide the paper trail, leaving Rebecca and the boy out on the street so he could save his own skin. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but it immediately rang again. I answered it. Hello? Lily. The voice was small, trembling, and deeply familiar. It's Rebecca. I gripped the phone tightly. How did you get this number? I found it on an old emergency contact form Davion left in my apartment years ago, she said. Please don't hang up. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But I need to talk to you. Davion is trying to destroy both of us. I met Rebecca at a sterile, brightly lit diner halfway between Oak Park and Naperville. I didn't want cozy. I wanted neutral ground. She looked worse than she had on my porch. The dark circles under her eyes were bruised and heavy, and she nervously shredded a paper napkin into tiny ribbons as I slid into the booth across from her. I didn't know you existed until Leo was 2 years old, Rebecca blurted out, skipping any pleasantries. When we met at the firm, he told me he was in the middle of a brutal divorce. He said his ex-wife was moving to California. I believed him. When I got pregnant, he bought the townhouse and told me to quit my job, saying he wanted to provide for us. And when did you figure out I wasn't in California? I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. I saw an alumni magazine from his university, she whispered, staring at the Formica table. There was a photo of the two of you at a gala. I confronted him. He broke down, crying, saying you were horribly depressed, that you threatened self-harm if he ever left you, and that he was only staying until your daughter was old enough to handle it. He promised me he was leaving on her 10th birthday. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. He painted me as the fragile, unhinged wife, and you as his savior. Classic. I was stupid, Lily. I was trapped. I had no job, a toddler, and he controlled all the money. But last month, I found plane tickets in his briefcase. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I opened it. It was a printout of an itinerary, a one-way first-class ticket to Buenos Aires, Argentina, booked for the end of October. He wasn't going to leave you for me, Rebecca said, her voice cracking. He was going to leave both of us. The auditors at his firm were closing in on his embezzlement. He stopped paying my rent and emptied the accounts because he was liquidating everything to run. I stared at the ticket, the final puzzle piece snapping into place. Davion was a coward masquerading as a king. When the walls of his lies began to close in, his instinct was to burn the castle to the ground and flee, leaving 2 women and 2 children to perish in the smoke. I looked up at Rebecca. I didn't forgive her. I probably never would. She had actively participated in my deception for 5 years, choosing her own comfort over my reality. But in that moment, I realized we were both victims of the same predator. My lawyer is scheduling a mediation session for Friday, I said softly, sliding the itinerary back to her. I want you to be there. Rebecca's eyes widened. He'll kill me. He won't lay a finger on you, I replied, my voice hardening into steel. Because I am going to end him. Friday arrived with a bitter, freezing wind sweeping off Lake Michigan. I sat at a long, polished oak table in Victoria's conference room. Davion walked in 10 minutes late, flanked by a slick, expensive-looking lawyer. Davion looked awful. He had lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame, but his arrogance remained entirely intact. He sneered at me as he sat down. Let's make this quick, Lily, Davion said, leaning back in his chair. I'm willing to give you the house and primary custody of Lily, provided you sign an NDA regarding my personal affairs. I'll pay standard alimony, but my lawyer has drafted an agreement that protects my bonuses and future earnings. Victoria smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Before we discuss alimony, Mr. Mitchell, Victoria said, opening her thick manila folder, we need to discuss the fraudulent second mortgage you took out on the marital home by forging my client's signature. Davion's slick lawyer froze. Davion's face drained of color. That's an absurd accusation, Davion stammered. Is it? Victoria asked. She pulled out a stack of papers and slid them across the table. We have the sworn affidavit from the notary public, whom you bribed. We also have a copy of the corporate expense reports you submitted to your firm, laundering over $200,000 through a dummy LLC to pay for a townhouse in Naperville. You don't have proof of that! Davion shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Those are internal firm documents. You can't legally obtain those. We didn't obtain them, Davion, a new voice said. The heavy glass door to the conference room opened. Rebecca stepped inside. Davion shot up from his chair clattering backward onto the hardwood floor. What is she doing here? Get her out. Rebecca didn't steal the documents, Davion, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table. She brought the copies you carelessly left in your Naperville home office to my lawyer. And then, my lawyer hand-delivered those copies to the managing partners of your architectural firm this morning. The silence in the room was absolute. I watched a man realize his life was entirely over. You did what? Davion whispered, the arrogance entirely stripped away, leaving only a hollow, terrified shell. They fired you at 9 a.m., Davion. Victoria chimed in smoothly. They are filing criminal charges for embezzlement. Furthermore, because you forged Lily's signature on the second mortgage, the bank is pursuing felony fraud charges. You aren't going to Argentina, Davion. We canceled your ticket. I stood up, walking around the table until I was standing inches from him. He couldn't even look me in the eye. He was staring at the floor, breathing heavily, completely broken. You told me she meant nothing, I said softly, my voice echoing in the silent room. You were right. She meant nothing. I meant nothing. Your daughter meant nothing. The only thing that ever mattered to you was yourself. And now, you have absolutely nothing left. I walked out of the conference room, leaving him to suffocate in the ruins of the life he had destroyed. The aftermath was messy, but it was a mess of my own making, a mess I could control. Davion was indicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. To avoid a lengthy trial, he took a plea deal that landed him in federal prison for 4 years. He lost his license, his reputation, and his freedom. As part of the settlement, the firm's insurance covered the stolen funds, allowing me to clear the fraudulent mortgage on my house. I kept the home in Oak Park. I kept my peace. I never saw Rebecca again after that day in the conference room. I know she moved back to her hometown in Indiana to live with her sister. Despite everything, I felt a strange sense of relief knowing she had escaped him. As for Leo, he is an innocent boy who shares half of my daughter's DNA. Through our lawyers, I set up a small, modest college fund for him. It wasn't for Rebecca. It wasn't to absolve Davion. It was because no child deserves to carry a name that equates to ruin without having a fighting chance to build something better with it. Lily and I are thriving. My landscape business took off, and I recently redesigned the entire garden of a boutique hotel downtown. On Sunday mornings, we sit on the porch, the very porch where my world ended, and drink hot cocoa, watching the seasons change. I lost my perfect marriage, but I gained something infinitely more valuable, my absolute, unbreakable reality. I survived the storm, and as it turns out, I am an excellent architect of my own life. Sometimes, the most perfect-looking marriages hide the darkest secrets. Rebuilding my life after Davion's ultimate betrayal wasn't easy, but finding my truth and taking back my power was worth every single tear. If my journey resonated with you, or if you've ever had to find the strength to walk away from toxic lies, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories.